The Alberta provincial election is coming up at the end of May, and today we're chatting with one of the candidates from the Medicine Hat Brooks riding, Barry Morishita, who's also the former mayor of Brooks and leader of the Alberta Party. Barry, welcome to Bridge City News.
Oh, thanks for having me, Hal. I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. Now tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and why you decided to take an election run and a shot at unseating Premier Daniel Smith.
Well, I've been in municipal politics, as you said, for 16 years, 5 as mayor. I ran the provincial organization for 4 years as president. And one of the things that we had trouble with was just, partnering in a reasonable, good fashion with the province. There were lots of barriers, lots of frustration. And I think really it came down to that we needed new partnerships. We needed a new way of doing things in the province. And so I decided to explore my options, and I landed with the Alberta Party.
Now, some say that you are socially liberal but fiscally conservative, the Alberta Party. How would you best describe your party?
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. I think we are fiscally conservative. I think we really do agree you need value for money and that you have to balance the books and pay for what you get. It's important for people to understand that there's a direct link between what they pay in taxes and what they get in services. And then when it comes to the social side, government has a role to play to look after people, public education, public health care, social services. But one of the things that we're significantly different about those files is that we really think we need to bring some real innovation into those areas in order to deliver the services better. The systems really haven't changed much in 50 years, and I don't think, continually pouring money into it's going to make them better. So that's where we're a little bit different.
Now, the latest polls show that the NDP and UCP are tied around 35%, but there are 22% who are undecided. So, Barry, let me ask you something. How will you sway over those voters to the Alberta Party?
Well, I think to being very honest with them, I'm not running to be the premier. We know we're not going to form government. So what we've been telling people and saying to people is that if you want a moderate alternative, if you want to be able to keep kind of the extreme policy pieces on both sides of the spectrum out of the government and get back to kind of sensible, thoughtful decision making, elect some Alberta Party MLAs to do that job. And then maybe we can quit this pendulum swinging back, quit the divisive politics that we have right now that seems to be just so destructive, and get people to participate again. So elect a few MLAs and we could hold the balance of power and keep the government to account, whoever's leading it.
Some say that you and the Alberta Party will become Queenmaker, making either Daniel Smith or Rachel Notley queen, depending upon where the votes land. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, we would never make a specific deal. I mean, obviously in our system, someone's going to be asked to form government, and we would certainly support policy and legislation that advanced Albertans, and we would really promote a collaborative effort to do that. So, while we would certainly support a government, whoever that was, whether it was the UCP or the NDP in power, but there would have to be legislation by legislation. We wouldn't be forming any deals or any coalitions or anything like that, and letting our constituents speak through their MLAs.
Now, with the pressures of inflation continuing, Barry, one of the big election issues is affordability. What do you have in mind to address this for everyday Albertans?
Well, there's a couple of things. We like the idea of the affordability payments, but we don't think they were targeted enough to people who needed it more. We look at students who were really hit hard by the inflation. I think we would have moved some money to students, about $54 million into students' pockets immediately. There are a lot of single people and couples without children who live on the margins, barely making it. We would have directed some more affordability payments that way. And the other thing we've looked at is, increasing the personal exemption on income taxes higher in Alberta because it's just costing so much to live. We've looked at a number of things in, like I said, post-secondary education, a number of things in this people that are supported. In terms of providing with the living wage opportunity, working on clawing back less and allowing them to have more and trying to lift up that boat. And so those are some of the things we do in the affordability file. Then lastly, I think the whole regulated rate on utilities, both natural gas and electricity, has to be revisited. It's almost kind of works backwards. If you're not in a position to be able to sign a contract or qualify for contract, you actually get penalized by the regulated rate. And we think that needs to be reformed as well to make it more affordable and more predictable for Albertans.
Speaking of more affordable, the NDP keep hammering on car insurance rates. They keep going through the roof, keep going up and away. What's your plan for that, solving those issues?
Well, we think there's some models that work. And one of the things that the Alberta Party prides itself on is that you don't have to take only one road. There's some, the Saskatchewan government has a really kind of an interesting plan where they still have private brokers, they still have access to private insurance, but they also have basic insurance available for Saskatchewan motorists at a very significantly discounted rate. And I think those options need to be explored. I'm not a big believer in like capping things or those types of approaches. I think if there's a better option, we should look at it. And then people should be free to make their decision on where they want to put their money.
You know, Barry, many people would argue we're not just about agriculture here in Alberta, but also energy, with many in your riding, Medicine Hat Brooks, really depending upon this. And oftentimes we butt heads with the federal government over oil and gas production. So in your opinion, what can be done to best manage our abundant energy supplies to create jobs and benefit the majority of Albertans?
Well, I think there's two things that are really in the way. One is certainty politically in Alberta itself. So I've talked to a lot of industry people who are kind of waiting for the kind of runway to be cleared up and that they know what's going to happen after the next election and beyond. We've seen jurisdictions to the south of us in the United States incentivize a lot of carbon capture and those kinds of things. I think we have to meet those head on, and the province has a role to play in that by working with the federal government to say, hey, how are we going to support the energy industry in Canada? If anything over the last couple of years have taught us is that we need that. The world market is a tough place to constantly be relying on. And the other thing is that we need energy certainty because our economy can't deal with that, any problems in that area. So I think working with industry to say, what do we need to set up for regulations and long-term support in terms of certainty? And we need to do that right away. 10 or 12 years is not unreasonable to lay out that plan. And the Alberta Party would be working with the federal government and industry to make sure that happens.
So on the environmental front, can there actually be a balance between oil and gas and renewable green energy? Can that be achieved in some fashion?
I think it can. We can't pick winners and losers. I think we have to walk together on this. The Alberta Party said we don't want any coal mining, for instance, on the eastern slopes. We want the current mines cleaned up and their liabilities be responsible to take care of that stuff. That has to happen. We have a water first policy when it comes to looking at environmental things. We can't really do anything without water. So we have to safeguard those. But I think we have the opportunity to work with others instead of on our own and then, foist plans or kind of impose plans on other groups, whether they're Indigenous groups, whether they're farmers or landholders or just our park spaces and things like that. We've got to work together to get this done. And Albertans can do that. We have a solid history of working together. It's when we get divisive and we don't consider other people's input is when we run into trouble. And I think we've seen that happen in the last 10 years a lot.
Barry, let's talk about healthcare for a moment here. We've seen time and time again the doctor shortage, not just here in Lethbridge. I mean, in your region, I talk to people who don't have a doctor. It's a province-wide issue. What's your plan to address the physician shortage here in Alberta?
So there's really two pieces to this. One is short-term and long-term. This is a long-term problem. I was shocked when I've talked to doctors in this last year to really, there's not a really good plan for the population growth in Alberta. I was happy to see that both parties are talking about increasing spaces in post-secondaries for graduates. We would support that. We think it needs to be doubled immediately. Right. We'd like to see rural pre-med programs that have a rural stream and an Indigenous stream to bring some diversity into that area and to allow others opportunities to get into the health field. When it's 95% or 96% to get into a nursing course or a nursing program, it really excludes a lot of people. So we would do that in the long term. In the short term, there's a couple other things I think we need to do. So we've got nurse practitioners and physician's assistants that could provide a lot more primary care if the billing structure was better. They got to work in a team environment with doctors and with their communities, but I think that could offer some short-term relief. And the other thing is the accreditation of foreign trained workers, healthcare workers. You know, Statistics Canada tells us we have 40,000 underemployed healthcare workers in Alberta. And surely we should be able to find ways to deal with our issues of accreditation in a more timely manner, especially when we're stressing out the system and creating work conditions that are actually, forcing people to leave the profession instead of stay with it. So those are some of the initiatives we would like to discuss with whoever's in government to get some of those programs going.
You know, the UCP has talked about that extensively as well, bringing in more foreign trained doctors from countries all over the world. Let me ask you something though, Barry. I understand that the city of Brooks has one of Alberta's highest ethnically diverse populations. Are there any specific needs this creates for your region?
Yeah, and this kind of speaks to our model of how we fix problems. So in education, for instance, we have over 100 languages spoken. ESL is a huge component in our area. And I don't think the resources are there to enable students to be able to reach their potential. So we think there has to be exceptions to the rule. There's got to be a way to fund classroom spaces based on those really unique needs. We've gone from very little of ethnic and language issues over the last 30 years to having, 40% visible minorities in Brooks and a great employer that continues to support the economy and the community in JBS. But there are some challenges and we have to face those, and that they are different than they would be in maybe Peace River or Balzac or Claresholm, right? So we have to accept that. The other thing is even in the healthcare system as well, the language barrier is an issue. And I think things like maternity clinics and parenting courses, I think sometimes you have to accept that having equity across the province doesn't mean that everybody gets the same dollar figure, that you've got to put resources where you need them in order to get the best outcomes. And the Alberta Party's focused on outcomes.
Let's touch base on education for just a moment here. Where do you really stand, and where do you see potential change needed in our education system?
Well, again, this comes down to an issue of planning for the future. We don't have, our classrooms are too big. The Alberta Party would really want classroom maximum set, and that allows the proper funding to go to it. These costs that education they're actually not really costs for Albertan, they're investments. Those dollars that we spend on early intervention, those dollars that we spend on making sure that individual attention is paid. My daughter's a teacher. She's married to a teacher. She teaches high school English and social studies. She doesn't have a class that's not 30 kids or more with some ESL issues. One teacher doing that's not possible. I think the other thing in education is that we have to allow teachers to teach in the classroom. We've got to unburden them from some of the administrative duties that they seem to be constantly being piled on top of them. And then lastly, I think we have to look at why we test. I understand that we need testing to benchmark ourselves, but I really question the amount of testing we do and whether it actually leads to better results. Again, overall, we need to work with parents and teachers and students to get better outcomes. And it's okay to change the system. It's okay to try to bring improvements in. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. But doing the same thing over and over again is not going to get you a significantly better result. And that's what we'd like to see some things happen at the ground level in education as well.
What about the opioid crisis and the crime and homeless issues that many in our province are facing right now? How should that really be addressed?
I think we need more tools in the toolbox. I accept that, the treatment and those kinds of things are an important part of the process, but so is harm reduction. I think we need people we've got to stop as many people from dying of this crisis as possible. And there's a lot of issues there: mental health, homelessness, poverty, all of those things create a lot of these issues. So I don't think there's only one solution. But again, when it comes to the safety of people that are affected by that use, I think we do have to work together, and I think it makes sense for the province to become involved. They should be working with municipalities that have that problem and making people feel safer. But I think we have to be careful again about only having one method. We didn't get here that way. There's all kinds of, these are human beings we're dealing with, and I think we have to treat them like that.
Barry Morishita is the leader of the Alberta Party and a candidate in the Medicine Hat Brooks riding. Barry, thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.